Starting in 1918, over a period of roughly 18 months, the city of New Orleans and surrounding areas were rocked by a serial killer by the names of the Axeman. The Axeman was a manifestation of the boogeyman, lurking in the shadows of New Orleans, almost exclusively attacking at night, and is possibly responsible for 12 attacks and 6 killings. In chilling fashion, he only seemed to strike people while they slept in their beds. The Axeman eerily never used his own tools. He only used what he can find on hand in the victims' households, usually an axe, which he typically left behind at the scene of the crime. His creepy tendency is now established. Let's get into the timeline. On May 23, 1918, at 4901 Magnolia Street, the first suspected Axeman attack occurred. Catherine and Joseph Maggio were struck violently by an axe, a straight razor used on their throats. Catherine had almost been entirely decapitated, and Joseph had suffered many severe injuries. The bodies were discovered by Joseph's brothers, who lived in the same house. Nothing was heard or seen, and no valuables were taken. The bottom panel of the kitchen door was knocked out. All that was found was an axe. Fingerprinting was around at the time, but was allegedly not yet a standard procedure. A little over a month later, on June 28, 1918, near the corner of Dorgenois and La Harpe Streets, another attack occurred. A severely injured Louis Bessemer and Anna Lowe were discovered by a baker named John Zanka, making morning deliveries. Louis would actually survive the attack, and Anna would survive for another several weeks before dying. Anna had allegedly reported to police that a large white man with a hatchet had attacked them. The bottom panel of the bedroom door was missing, and once again a bloody axe was left at the scene. Roughly a month later, on August 5, 1918, in an undisclosed home location, Mrs. Ed Schneider was found by her husband in the afternoon of their home. Mrs. Schneider was still alive and rushed to Charity Hospital and would reportedly survive the attack. Upon investigation, it was discovered that the axe was missing from their shed. Mrs. Schneider was also pregnant, and I'm happy to report that in a week following the attack, she successfully gave birth. 5 days later, on August 10, 1918, reportedly near Tonty and Gravier Street, 80-year-old Joseph Romano was found by his nieces, Pauline and Mary, after they heard him struggling. His head was bashed in. The two girls allegedly saw the attacker and described him as, quote, dark, tall, heavy-set, wearing a dark suit and a black slouch hat, end quote. Joseph Romano would die 2 days later. Around this time, August 1918, the New Orleans newspaper allegedly recounted, quote, armed men were keeping watch over their sleeping families, while the police are seeking to solve the mysteries of the axe attacks. Extra police are being put to work daily, end quote.
And when looking at the timeline, it apparently worked. For a while, that is, as nearly 7 months later, on March 10, 1919, the Cortimiglia family was attacked. Rose Cortimiglia woke to her husband Charles fighting the Axeman, a fight that Charles would lose. Rose and their 2-year-old daughter Mary were also attacked. Rose and Charles would actually survive, but their daughter tragically did not. In typical Axeman fashion, the axe used belonged to the Cortimiglias. 5 days later, a New Orleans newspaper called the Time-Picayune received a letter from the apparent Axeman. Quote, Hell, March 13, 1919. Esteemed mortal, they have never caught me and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether which surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a fell demon from the hottest hell. I am what you New Orleans and your foolish police call the Axeman, end quote. He also goes on to insult and threaten the police. Quote, they have been so utterly stupid as to amuse not only me, but his satanic majesty. But tell them to beware. Let them not try to discover what I am, for it were better that they were never born than for them to ensure the wrath of the Axeman. End quote.
He also goes on to remind the people that he could be worse. Quote, undoubtedly you all Indians think of me as the most horrible murderer, which I am. But I could be much worse if I wanted to. At will, I could slay thousands of your best citizens, for I am in close relationship with the angel of death. End quote. However, the most important clause would be the specific threat, which would terrify the entire New Orleans community. Quote, now, to be exact, at 12:15 o'clock on next Thursday night, I'm going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I'm going to make a little proposition to the people. Here it is. I'm very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose house a jazz band is in full swing. At the time I have just mentioned, if everyone has a jazz band going, well then, so much the better for the people. One thing is certain, and that is some of those persons who do not jazz it on Thursday night, if there be any, will get the axe. End quote. This letter would later spark the creation of the jazz song Don't Scare Me Papa, also known as the Mysterious Axeman Jazz. The Tuesday night mentioned in the letter was March 19, 1919. It is said that the city is truly alive that night, as people blasted jazz music in their homes, and those who did not have a record player poured into near jazz clubs to stay clear of the Axeman. It's worth mentioning that nobody was killed on March 19, 1919. On August 10, 1919, Steve Bogo was badly injured at his home after he woke to a man next to his bed with an axe. Bogo managed to survive the attack, reportedly staggered to a friend's home after he called the police. Bogo did not regain his memory, likely due to the blows to the head. Later that month, or in early September, on 21 22nd Street, 19-year-old Sarah Lawman was reportedly attacked by someone who entered through an open window. When she recalled consciousness, she could not recall the attack. About 2 months later, on October 27, 1919, the corner of South Scott in Elora Street, the suspected axeman attacked Esther and Mike Pepperton. Esther reportedly woke at 1 a.m. to her husband screaming and ran to the bedroom. Her husband's head was struck 18 times and died 2 hours later. Esther saw two figures in the bedroom but could not identify them as they fled the scene. A bolt with a heavy nut, something used to secure a circus tent, was one of the apparent weapons. There was a circus in the nearby Tulane Avenue that weekend.